Hello, and you're very welcome to episode 9 of the Unsafe Space. My name is Keith Redmond. I'm a former Fine Gael councillor, and I'm joined by
Sarah Ryan, former Fianna Fail councillor,
and my beloved other half. And today we're going to get down and dirty and talk about politics. We're going to talk about the upcoming by-elections that are due on November the 29th. There are 4 by-elections due to be held as a result of people being elected and sent off to Europe. So they all became MEPs and they vacated their seats, and now the good people of these constituencies need another TD. So we're talking about Dublin Midwest, where Frances Fitzgerald was the TD and she's now an MEP. Dublin Fine Gael, where Claire Daly is now an MEP. Wexford, where Mick Wallace was the TD and is now an MEP. And Cork North Central, where Billy Kelleher for Fianna Fail is now an MEP and was a TD. So these 4 by-elections, they're very interesting really, because they're coming in at a time in the political cycle that is just before a general election. We're anticipating a general election in the next 6 months. And so it's very interesting because they're almost like the trial run, if you like, for the general election. Now, we will get into it a bit more as we discuss it, but by-elections are interesting because they're not really the complete bellwether for how a political party is doing or will do in a general election for a number of reasons. They can sometimes be considered a bit of a protest vote, like a kind of a local election, European elections, where you give the government a kicking. This could be an opportunity for the electorate to give them a kicking and a bit of a wake up. But also because it's not quite first past the post, you do have transfers, but it's kind of halfway between our normal way of electing people, proportional representation, where you got multiple seats in one constituency. It's only one seat in the constituency, but it's not first past the post. So it's kind of a quirky way of trying to analyse the political firmament in the country at the moment, because it's not really all that indicative. But we'll try and draw a few parallels. But we're going to discuss the different by-elections and how we think they're going to do, and then also in general we're going to discuss was this a good idea? Leo had an opportunity here. The by-elections have to be called within 6 months of the seat being vacated. So did Leo have to do it? Did he have to call the by-elections, or should he have just called a general election? Because he does run the risk here that if he loses all of these by-elections, which is eminently possible,
here's hoping.
He goes into the general election just a few months later, really with a good kicking from the electorate, and it takes away momentum. It has to take away momentum, and it makes him look less viable to the wider population. So it's a big risk. Now, he could sail through this. This could be the post-Brexit bonanza. He could end up getting 2 or 3 of these seats and looking really good then going into a general election. So such is politics, such is life. But Sarah's going to start off the conversation there about Dublin Fine Gael, perhaps, because we live in Dublin Fine Gael, so we know a bit about that one personally.
Well, I think they're all interesting because no offence, but I really don't think that there's any chance that this is going to be a good day for Fine Gael. I think that by-elections, and I've been involved in many of the by-election myself, by-elections tend to favour the opposition for reasons you said. But also there is a difficulty here, I suppose, in the fact that there is no clear opposition at the moment. So there's not a message that people are going to get their teeth into and run with. There's
no water charges.
There's no single issue thing that they can use this, because by-elections, a little bit like local elections in the sense, like, they often become about so much more than what they are. Do you know what I mean? Like, for example, in Fine Gael, this is a seat to replace Claire Daly. Claire Daly has been elected to Europe. Claire Daly is the antithesis of me in terms of everything she believes politically, but she is was a good TD and worked very hard, and I do have a level of respect for her on that in that regard. So in theory, the by-election in Fine Gael should be about replacing Claire Daly with a hard-working TD of a similar, you would imagine, political persuasion. But it never ends up like that. It's always about something else. It's always about who's riding high, who's riding low. I would be pretty confident that Claire Daly is not going to elect a Solidar, whatever party she's in, you know, people before profit type candidate in Fingal. It's just not going to happen. Claire Daly is a brand in herself, and with her goes the seat, as far as I'm concerned. So I think that Fianna Fáil have a good chance of winning a number of these seats. The tricky part is that in Cork and in Fingal, you have former unseated TDs in Senator Colin Burke and then Senator James Riley
for Fine
Gael. So you would imagine that, for example, in Fingal, you have Senator Lorraine Clifford for Fianna Fáil, who would be, I would consider to be very competent and very good running against James Riley. But he does have, you know, memory, like constituency memory, in the sense that he was a TD before.
He was the TD, yeah.
So, you know, she'll be hoping to capitalise on the kind of young, fresh thing. And I don't think, and she would have come quite close to him votes-wise in the last general, when he lost his seat. But I don't think Fine Gael is doing particularly well in Fingal at the moment. We have Deputy Alan Farrell, and he's had, you know, a range of problems, public problems, that won't do the Fine Gael brand any favours in that election. Green Party candidate in this constituency, I would have said would be probably pretty strong. But I think it's Lorraine's. To lose at the moment.
It's an interesting one. I mean, I think, as you say, on the face of it, you would think that a previous TD has to have an advantage going into a by-election against people who were never TDs before. And the brand is there, the name is there. People have, could well have helped them out when he was a TD, and
he's a senator, and he works the ground as a senator.
Yeah, he's a senator. He's a local GP and all that stuff. So I would have thought that Fine Gael has always been very strong in Fingal. I mean, Dublin Fingal has obviously the seaside towns all the way up, and then the bigger conurbations like Balbriggan now is becoming really big. Swords, obviously, but it's actually quite a rural constituency. I mean, if you go a little further than Swords, if you go further north than Swords, it becomes very rural, and Fine Gael would have a good base in the rural community and the farming community and stuff. So I wouldn't discount James Riley's prospects there, especially if we do get a bit of a kind of a wind behind a Brexit resolution, because Brexit one way or the other is going to be sorted out by the time November 29th comes around. So if Leo gets a win on Brexit, seems to have taken away the fears that everybody had that there was going to be this crash out, and he seemed to have been a statesman, and so you could see a bit of a boon for Fine Gael in the election, people wanting to kind of reward Fine Gael for stability and all the rest of it. Now, it comes down to individuals obviously as well, like people like and don't like certain individuals, and that's fine, but the parties themselves will have to have where the parties are seen by the electorate will have to have an effect as well. So Fine Gael could get James Riley across the line. Fianna Fáil are a bit, from my point of view, Sarah, I think Fianna Fáil are kind of a bit anonymous. They're kind of 1 foot in government, 1 foot out of government, but they're not really proposing anything particularly new. There's no real kind of vote for us because line. I know Lorraine is really nice, very competent, and as you say, fresh face, young female, all that stuff, that all will do really well for her. I think she's actually the only female running in the election. That has to help her with women voters, I would have thought. So I think it is hers to, and Fianna Fáil very strong in Fingal as well. Until recently had 2 TDs there. Dara Bryan topped the poll last time. So I would think that it's probably Lorraine's to lose, because she'll probably get more transfers, more transfer friendly perhaps than James will be. But the dark horse is, and this sounds strange, but the Labour candidate, Duncan Smith, who is a pal of mine. I have to just say that up front. But it's a kind of a strange one, because if Duncan can hang around in there, he's bound to get a lot of the more left-wing transfers. You're going to see Sinn Féin dropping out. You're going to see the Independent Alliance person dropping out. You're going to see People for Profit dropping out. So you're going to see a lot of left-wing candidates dropping out. They're bound to transfer more to Duncan than they will to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And so if he can hang around long enough, if he managed to get a nudge ahead of Lorraine, he could, and Lorraine went out, I think Lorraine's vote would push him over above Riley, because I think he'll get more than that.
I don't think he's going to nudge ahead of Lorraine.
I'm trying to help Duncan out. He's listening to the podcast. He's gone out canvassing every night. I'm trying to give him a bit of a fill-up. it's stranger things have happened.
But look, the thing is, right, stranger things have happened. You don't really know what's going to happen with Brexit. Brexit could be a complete disaster and Leo could lose even more votes.
Yeah.
The issue that I think, and like obviously we're political.
You see now, by the way, we're recording this before we know what's happening with Brexit, so just bear that in mind.
But obviously, like, you know, we're political anoraks. We, you know, eat this stuff morning, noon and night, and we're really into it. But occasionally, you'd be surprised to know that we are also allowed to brush up against people who aren't interested in politics at all. They do let us out into the wild from time to time. We are able to mingle with normal people. And so I'm always struck by the fact that when I sit down, like I went to college and I've 5 girlfriends that we all went travelling together or whatever, and we meet up and everybody has kids and all that, and there's no like resonation of any party's message with those girls, and they're all like buying houses and you know, like
need childcare
and need this, whatever, and they never like they'd always say to me, oh, what's this and what's going on with that, and you know, they take an interest, but there's no party that's giving a message at the moment that's really hitting home with that kind of person. And so I think that you might obviously there's different walks of life and all that, but I think that the by-elections, the turnouts might be really poor.
Yeah.
And when turnouts are really poor, weird things happen.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like
and the transfers,
it comes down to whose voters are the most committed, and like, you know, sometimes very strange people's voters can be exceptionally committed, and then the transfers will come into it. So
the transfers is going to be the most important thing, because like, you know, your first preference vote is only really going to keep you in the last 2 or 3, the heel of the hunt. The transfers are actually going to elect the TDs, and whoever's most transfer friendly, and oftentimes that can just be somebody who's the least offensive. So you know, it's about people just going, oh yeah, I'll give him a vote, don't really know much about him, but the other guy I don't like. So it can be, you know, I think the transfers are what's going to elect the person. That's why I wonder if Duncan has a shot in Fine
and
Gael.
also sometimes as well, like it really comes down to like on the ground work. Like some by-elections, like what was George Lee years ago, you know, that was kind of a national figure, like high end, you know, he just walked around and kissed a few babies and like romped home, and that was great. Other times people in by-elections get elected based entirely on their pure hard graft, and pure hard on the ground graft sometimes comes from councillors as opposed to more national politicians like senators. So Duncan might very well be doing reps and, you know, housing and like all kinds of council things morning, noon and night.
And Labour already have a TD in Fine Gael as well, Brendan Ryan.
And have a really, really, really strong base that he's built up on that basis. So yeah, for sure, I think anything can happen. But at the moment, my money's on Lorraine.
Yeah, I think it's Lorraine's to lose. I think she is going to be very transfer friendly, only female running, and Fianna Fail do well in Fine Gael anyway. So I think it's hers to lose. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was any one of those 3, Riley, Clifford Lee or Duncan. The interesting thing before we move off on Fine Gael is that, you know, each of those candidates have a party colleague that's already a TD. So Brendan Ryan's the Labour TD, Dara O'Brien is the Fianna Fail TD, and Alan Farrell is the Fine Gael TD. So it could be a situation where whoever wins is a TD until the general election 6 months later and could lose the seat. So, I mean, you can imagine the tragedy of working your whole life to become a TD and then you're a TD for 6 months and you're gone again.
Oh, God.
I mean, it's just horrible to think about. But yeah, that's politics, brutal stuff. So we'll move on now to Dublin Midwest, which is where Francis Fitzgerald was the TD and is now an MEP. You can tell me about some of the others, but Fine Gael are running Emer Higgins, who's a local Fine Gael councillor, who I've known for many years when she was in the PDs. Lovely girl and really, really good politician. And Fianna Fail are running what's the chap's name? I said it to you earlier on, and you said you knew him, but he's also a local councillor as well. It'll come to me now in a second. And then the Labour are running Joanna Tuffy, who's the former Labour TD for out there, who's a really, really competent politician I have a lot of respect for. People Before Profit have a candidate. Sinn Féin haven't announced their candidate yet, which is interesting because they've got Owen O'Brien, who's the TD for Sinn Féin out there at the moment, presumably be one of their councillors, but you wouldn't know. I mean, Sinn Féin can sometimes throw you a curveball. It could be anybody, whoever the Army Council decide. And so it's Yeah, so I have a sneaky feeling again, like this is going to come down to, you've got the two main parties have their local councillors running, and so it's a lot to do with the work that they've done as local councillors, whether they get a good vote. But Dublin Midwest would strike me, typically it's a very large working class community. I would have thought that, they have Gino Kenny out there, who's like people before profit, TD, so they do elect left wing people. I have a funny feeling that this is one that, you could see a left winger. I think Joanna Tuffy, because she's a former TD, and on the left, I have a funny feeling. Again, I keep saying that Labour have a funny feeling.
Yeah, like what is this? Who are you?
No, it's because of the peculiarities of by-elections, because of the transfers. I think the transfers, you could see the transfers going to her more.
But do you not think that a lot of lefty people aren't transferring to Labour anyway?
Yeah, but are you going to transfer to Fianna Fail or Fine Gael? I don't think so. So I just think that she just disproportionately is going to get more. I just think that because she was a TD, she also has a better shot. So
the other interesting thing about having kind of a super election day in terms of by-elections, where you have 4 by-elections on the one day, is that normally, there would be one by-election, it'd be totally the focus, and all parties would send the absolute best of their resources all to this one location. Like, I would have worked a lot of the Meath East by-election, and like, you couldn't move but for canvassers from all over the country travelling down to Meath to work on the by-election. People be staying over, going out on Saturdays, whatever. But when you have 4, that's all very diluted down. So you really are relying on local organisations. And I think every party is suffering from the deterioration of the local organisation in terms of canvassers. Like, I don't know anybody who's involved in politics who wouldn't say that the amount of canvassers that are available to a politician, a TD or whatever, now versus, 20 years ago is dramatically different. I mean, when my dad was the TD, used to have 100 people out canvassing on a night, all members of Fianna Fail, all from the local organisation, all out pounding the pavements for weeks and weeks and weeks every evening after work. That doesn't really exist anymore. I'm not saying there's not canvassers, there is, but the machines are smaller, the teams are smaller, and I think that the by-elections then become more questionable and more ambiguous because of that too.
Yeah, that's why they're so intriguing by-elections, because they really are a different animal completely to even looking at the same constituency in a general election. But so for Fine Gael, I think we're kind of saying it's Lorraine Clifford Lee's to lose. In Dublin Midwest, I have a feeling it's Joanna Tuffy's to lose, because
oh my God.
I just do. I just have a feeling that Joanna Tuffy's to lose. 2 local councillors, Fianna Fail, Fine Gael, fair enough. She's a former TD. And I'm just gonna wing it for that now. I think that's my outlier.
I'm gonna call that for Fianna Fail as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Apologies to the Fianna Fail candidate. I can't remember his name.
Neither can I.
But he's a local councillor. But yeah, that could happen. In fact, when you look overall, Fianna Fail could do really well in these by-elections. This is the thing we touched on about Leo. This could turn out to be a situation where Fianna Fail win 2 or even potentially 3 of these by-elections. Now, the momentum that gives Fianna Fail going into a general election just a few months later has to be numerically significant. It has to be a thing where they begin to look more like a viable government than Fine Gael, who've lost the by-elections. So if Dublin Midwest, which is Francis Fitzgerald's seat, Fine Gael, if that's lost, if Dublin Fingal, where Claire Daly was if that's lost to Fine Gael as well, that's Dublin basically saying no to Fine Gael.
Which one are you saying that Fianna Fail isn't going to win?
No, I think Fianna Fail could win Dublin Fingal, and I think Fianna Fail could win in either. I think they'll win in Wexford, and we'll discuss Wexford next, which is where Mick Wallace was the TD, and again. I think the Wexford by-election is intriguing because I really do think that is going to be between the 2 big ones. That'll be Fianna Fail, Fine Gael. The history in Wexford is really that Fianna Fail and Fine Gael have owned Wexford.
Shane Moynihan.
Shane Moynihan. Sorry, Shane. Sorry. Yes, I couldn't remember his name off the top of my head. But it's not my job anyway. You're the Fianna Failer here.
I know, but you were looking at that constituency.
Anyway, so yeah, Shane. Sorry, Shane. So I don't think he's going to win it, but yeah, sorry about that.
But see, you think Joanna Tuffy is going to win?
You mark my words now. We'll see what will happen. But she's the former TD anyway.
I know you're not even suggesting that Fine Gael are going to win that one.
No, Emer Higgins is very good, and she's very close to Frances Fitzgerald. Could very easily win. I think that Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael have an equal chance of winning that, but I think Joanna Tuffy has an edge. I do, but
we will see.
Just peculiarity of the by-election. But in Wexford, it's going to be either Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael.
I think Malcolm Byrne is going to win.
Yeah, I think Malcolm Byrne has to be on. He ran in the Euros.
He ran in the Euros, did really well. Super candidate, around a long time. I think Malcolm Byrne is going to win.
Yeah. So you could potentially have 2 Fianna Fáil seats out of...
No, I think...
You think 3?
Going.
You think 3?
So which is the one that they're not going to win?
Well, I don't think they're going to win Midwest. John Curran won Midwest last time, and he lost the seat the election before.
Everybody in Fianna Fáil lost their seat the election before.
I don't think there's a strong enough vote for Fianna Fáil in Dublin Midwest to pick up a seat.
Darrell O'Brien lost the seat in the election before in Dublin Fine Gael, and then he topped the poll the next.
I know. I'm just... My view, Dublin Midwest is not going to elect a Fianna Fáil TD on a one strike, election, like a by-election. I just don't think it. I think you could see Emer Higgins winning because Frances Fitzgerald's seat, and you could see that, or you could see my little wildcard Joanna Tuffy now. I think that could possibly happen.
I just think, honestly, hell is frozen over because you are saying Labour for 2 constituencies.
Well, no, I just...
What is the world coming to?
I'm trying to throw Duncan a bone here on the old Dublin thing.
I don't think he needs your help. He'll do great.
Yeah, he will do very well. But Wexford, I think, is really Malcolm Byrne's to lose. I think that, he ran in the Euros, massive profile, really well-known guy. He's been around for years.
Looks good, is good, talks good, all the right things.
Yeah. No, I think it definitely that I could see that happening. I don't see like Mick Wallace putting forward an independent that's going to win. I don't see that happening. Sinn Féin getting nowhere there. Fine Gael, obviously, they could pick it up. But I really think that it's Malcolm Byrne's to lose there. So the more we talk about this, the more this could turn into be a very good day for Fianna Fáil.
Yeah,
which would be where the gamble massively misfired for Leo, because it just makes it look terrible for Fine Gael to be losing all these fights against Fianna Fáil.
See, the thing is, do you think that Leo sat down and went, "Oh, this is a gamble" or whatever, or do you think Leo is just so apathetic at this point about stuff like this that he's just like, whatever? I just get this real vibe of
Well, you have to imagine that as the leader of Fine Gael, he and the people around him are strategizing for a good election for Fine Gael.
One would imagine so.
Well,
yes.
No, I think it'd be churlish to suggest it's not.
There's 2 schools of thought as well. I mean, if you're going to have a general election a couple of months later, there's one school of thought that would say that you're actually it benefits you to take a little bit of a pasting in those by-elections. Say if it's a referendum, a by-election, or local elections, the voters use it to punish you a little bit and then come back to you for the general election. There's the other school of thought, which is that if you take a big hit like that too close to a general election, you start to look a bit like a loser, and nobody votes for losers.
It's viability.
So it's definitely. I mean, I don't think the gamble is whether or not to have the by-elections. I think the gamble is, what's the narrative around these by-elections going to be? And I don't see...
There isn't one.
Yeah, that's the problem. And so then the responsibility for creating the narrative is down to the media, and
it could be local.
You roll the dice on that.
Yeah, it could be local.
But at the same time, the economy's doing well, things are on the up. If he sorts out the Brexit thing, I'm not by any means not saying it's perfect, but Leo should be winning a couple of these by-elections. End of story. I think the current state of play and the political landscape and everything that's going on, Leo should be winning a couple of these by-elections.
Well,
we shouldn't be. You should not. And this goes the same for Fianna Fáil, to be honest. It shouldn't even be a suggestion that Labour would be winning 2 of these by-elections, but it is, because there's no clear message yet.
Yeah, well, if we look at Cork North Central, which is where Billy Kelleher was the TD, the Fianna Fáil TD, he's now an MEP. Fianna Fáil are running a local councillor, Padraig O'Sullivan, and Fine Gael are running former TD, now Senator Colin Burke. Now, that's a seat that I think that Fine Gael could take. I think that the name recognition alone, the former TD, Colin Burke, he's a senator now, a lot of work on the ground, very kind of noisy, similar to James Riley and Fine Gael, a lot of leaflets going out, he gets a lot of media coverage, he's always on TV. I think that Colin Burke could take a seat for Fine Gael in Cork North Central. And so I think that's one that's Fine Gael's to lose. I think that's the banker, if you like, for Fine Gael. But if you think about it, if Colin Burke picked up a seat in Cork North Central and Fine Gael did get across the line in Fine Gael, they got James Riley elected, all of a sudden it's a good day for Leo. He gets 2 of the 4, and that's not so bad. There's no issue of viability or momentum there. So I think that there's small margins here which could make this a good day or a bad day.
I know, like if Fianna Fáil get a bit unlucky on one and only win 1 and Fine Gael win 2 and whatever, then it's a bad day for Fianna Fáil. Yeah. If the same goes the other way, it's a bad day. Like when, it's...
But I could easily see Fianna Fáil winning 3 seats. I could see them winning Fine Gael. I could see them winning in Wexford.
On a really good day with a couple of things going your way, you could see Fianna Fáil win 4. And if Fianna Fáil won 4...
Oh, that's a massive...
Like, that's a massive problem for Leo.
Yeah.
Here's hoping.
Yeah, because that'll make such a huge difference for all the people of Ireland to have, Fianna Fáil in instead of Fine Gael, as if that makes any difference whatsoever at the moment. So we try to make that as interesting as possible, even though at the moment the political consensus has turned our politics into a bit of a turd.
I know it's like, obviously politics and ideology and opinions and sense aside, you'd miss a bit of Mick Wallace now, wouldn't you? Like just for the madness,
Claire Daly,
just for the.
Well, they did do a statesome service. They really
did do a
statesome
service. They did.
They took out 2 Garda commissioners, a minister for justice, and people were laughing at them at the start of that. So I think they've definitely done the statesome service, and good luck to them over in Europe. But I just think it's not really going to matter, obviously, who's in government next time, Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, because they agree on virtually everything.
That's the spirit, Keith.
Well, they agree on everything, so may as well be in together.
Also, the fact is that these by-elections might end up meaning very little if there's a general election shortly afterwards. But we shall wait and see.
And as I say, you could win the by-election, be settling into your nice mahogany-lined offices.
Why do you always imagine up the saddest, most depressing life scenarios for people?
Oh, the tragedy of that. But
would you rather be a TD for 5 months or never at all?
Oh, I think never at all.
Yeah, I think so.
I think never at all. Oh God, it'd be awful, wouldn't it? Imagine, and you have to explain to your children, "No, I was a TD for 5 months." Oh no, God, it'd be terrible. But anyway, look, the best of luck to all the candidates running in those elections. I know canvassing in October, November has got to be a lot of fun.
Grim.
And obviously the parties themselves are all full of vim and vigour because all the activists are localising on those 4. So.
But we'll be back here to discuss it and lord it over each other depending on which way it went. And if Joanna Tuffy wins the by-election, I will eat humble pie.
Come on, Joanna!
Keith's going to actually go out and canvass for
Labour.
If you see Keith out voting for Labour, you'll know something catastrophic hasn't happened. He just so desperately wants to beat me.
Anyway, best of luck to everybody, we'll see how the chips fall and then the general ramifications for that as well afterwards, and we'll discuss that in a later podcast. But this has been episode 9 of the Unsafe Space, and we'll see you again next week.
Bye.